So there's a couple different ways you could look at Blood Feud, in my opinion. I'm gonna start with Reflection in Muddy Water because this one was interesting to me as an expression of self. It's very, as an expression of self, it's descriptive in the sense that it's almost abstract. Black cypress sketched in first light, longing taps its snare drum. A whooping crane untucks her face from her wing, bugles the day's first notes over the water's quiet coaxing. So we are kind of describing a puddle in a sense, but we're also describing kind of what the poet wants to be. Longing taps its snare drum in the same way um, as they're describing this puddle. Among the reeds, a rabbit shakes off. So we're describing something that exists that can be seen and conflating it with the reflection of who is and what is. Why do I see my own face stare back at me, even from this fluid state of souled matter? Red mud sluices down the bank, drooping like my flesh, but this coupling too is false. My mind is just a thicket of myself, trapping everything it finds. So it's like when you are unhappy with who you are, how can you seek to escape it? You see yourself everywhere and in everything. You notice your flaws in a muddy puddle. And using this mud puddle as the device for your reflection rather than just regular water, because regular water you can see as pure. It represents, I guess I just said purity. But muddy water, now that's dirty. That's something we look at as ugly, um, even though it may not be. Even though it may not be, because naturally this is something that naturally occurs in nature is muddy water, and I think why that's significant to this poem is because we are as human beings critical of ourselves first. So to take the this extended metaphor, it means a lot to me because we see our own flaws in everything that we do. It's very easy to see what you've done wrong over what you've done right, and to what you're not versus who you are versus who you would rather be. And I think using that being expressed through one's own reflection in a mud puddle through this natural phenomenon is clever because your own personal blemishes and your failures and your longings and who you would rather be, that's all natural too. That's part of being human. And I like how it's attribute there later on in the poem. There's stuff that's more attributed to nature. I resolved to be more modest, wonder how. I resolved to be more like a pine wood, know an orchard, natural in its art, but ordered. I cup these seeds in my hands. So now we're talking kind of like I was saying earlier, this extended metaphor for nature comes upon something that's more beautiful. Pine wood, an orchard, things that people look at as good things, as positive things, as symbols of beauty in nature. That and it's attributed to modesty. The poet doesn't know how; they don't know how to be that way, but they aspire to be. Um, it's describing the ugliness and the beauty of nature in contrast with the ugliness and beauty of humanity. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at it and a really interesting way to use extended metaphor in a poem. I think the line breaks are just perfect to illustrate that. I particularly like the final three stanzas here. Specifically, I resolve to be more like a pine wood, M dash, no an orchard, M dash, because that feels like very free flowing thought. Like, oh, I want to be like a pine wood, no, an orchard. Like that's a really good way to illustrate that. Um, I'm also really into Landscape with Blood Feud itself as a poem because it to me was a cool way of saying we kind of are the sum of our parts, and though we may like I'm explaining this poorly, but I am not a Hemi half ton pickup, toolbox in the back, gun rack, and deer painted cab, but I learned to drive one down a shell road, spewing dust and leaded fumes. I am not a Remington 30-06 with bolt-action standoff choke and soft-point cartridges. So it's saying that we are a collection of the experiences that we've had. We may not like that. We may not always like who we are or what we've done or who we've been, but we can't ignore the effects those have had on us and the fact that they are part of our identity. And in this description of home, um, the poet doesn't seem, the speaker, I should say, doesn't seem secure in that home or where they've been or who they are, even. And these experiences, I am not saying I am not these things, and yet I've used them. It's as if to say I am not happy with what I've done or who I've been. These don't match up with my image of myself. Um, and yet it is part of me. And it goes on to detail their family in the same way. My dad is a pair of Carhartt overalls filled with bullet holes and a pinch of snuff. That's who he is. This metaphor is um, describing her father as these things that make up who he is. And the mother is the same way, a bundle of wattles and whales, spit and snake bites that vie for her breath. Okay, so those descriptions and these metaphors, she is secure and her parents are secure in who they are, specifically. But this is in contrast to the beginning of the poem when the speaker is saying that though they have done these things, they are not these things. It's a sense of identity that they don't have in the same way the rest of their family does, almost in the sense that they don't belong in this space that the rest of their family belongs to. In fact, they say later on, I never wanted to be any specific place on the page or in a definite personal location to have a home, but home is still the empty set, the ever shifting proposition. They don't want to belong to the same place that their family does or be the same people that they are. Um, they want, they seek more freedom or to be something else, to choose their own path. And I think this is an interesting way to express that feeling.